Assalamualaikum guys, welcome back to our analysis of Islamic debt financing. We are trying to see if we can categorize the Islamic debt into good debt or bad debt. Is it a good idea to differentiate these Islamic debts into one that is good and one that is bad? I'm not here to provide any kind of fiqh perspective. This is just a perspective based on economic outcome or financial consequences of the transaction. And the good and the bad would be evaluated based on the consequences of the transaction, the pros and cons. And thus, this is a scientific observation that we use to, differentiate good Islamic debt and bad Islamic debt. So let us look at the good Islamic debt or the good debt. I will consider this to be a debt created from the Murabahah by purchase order contract, which means that for the MPO to be viable, it has to be funded by the investment account fund, because the risk of the MPO will be assumed or carried by the investment account holder, and the bank will act as the wakil or an agent or manager that will manage this transaction, but the risk would be totally borne by the investment account holder and not the bank. And we can see that when we have MPO funded by investment account holder, then it is possible for the MPO to engage in a lot of productive transaction involving the purchase of equipment and machineries, the purchase of land and property, for economic development. So this is a productive debt. So the MPO creates this productive debt as it stimulates the real sector when the fund is used to purchase real goods, real assets that will create new goods, that will create employment. And at the same time, we will see that this kind of debt financing, namely debt financing driven by the MPO model, this is the type of debt financing where morality is observed, because there is a taking of price risk. So unlike riba, where it is just an IOU, there is no buy and sell in riba, but there is buy and sell in the MPO, and for that MPO to be evidence, the risk in the MPO must be assumed by the investment account holder, and that is that is something that is expected, because the fund is an investment fund. It is an equity fund, and therefore it is by nature the investment account holder will accept any risk accorded to them based on the contract of the investment fund, which is a contract of equity. But when we look at the other side of the coin, debt created by tawarruk and malafide murabaha, I consider these debts as more inferior than the debt created by the MPO, because this debt, funded by deposit, debt created from tawarruk and murabaha are essentially funded by deposit fund. And for that reason, bank would want to avoid to do MPO or to do real sale, because they couldn't afford to carry the risk in the MPO, since that will trigger high amount of capital charges if they were to do the MPO. So what we can see here is the option to do tawarruk and Malafida Murabaha, where the cost of debt is much lower compared to MPO, because the cost of debt in tawarruk and Murabaha are only those related to the charging of credit risk premium, because the tawarruk and Malafida Murabaha, they don't carry any business risk. So that business risk is not added into the cost of debt. So we can see that the debt created by tawarruk is much cheaper, compared to debt created by MPO, due to the fact that the tawarruk and Malafida Murabaha, do not carry any business risk or price risk. So it can be a disadvantage to the MPO, but the MPO, what I will say is that even though it carry two kind of risk, which is credit and business risk, the business risk may trigger higher finance charge to the customer, but then it can be neutralized when if the bank is able to secure lower cost of purchase, because the bank as the wakil would be looking for many supplier, and the best price would be the lowest price offered by a supplier, and that lower supplier price can reduce the sale price of the goods. So to some extent, the MPO may not be expensive or more dearer than the tawarruk, as the bank, as a wakil, may be able to secure lower cost of purchase, and therefore lowering the profit margin. So we can see that in the case of the debt created by tawarruk and Malafida Murabaha, which I considered it to be inferior to the debt created by MPO. Why? Because we can see, number one, that the debt created by tawarruk and Malafida Murabaha, this can be unproductive, because the money can be used on speculative investment. As you know, because what happened here is that in tawarruk, what interests the customer is to get the liquidity, with which they will buy, the investment, or they will go into the speculative investment, margin financing, and the bank have no control over that behavior, and that is unproductive financing. So that is one, one of the so-called downside in the debt created by tawarruk, because it can land into unproductive spending, and at the same time it is a debt created from a financing where the taking of price risk have never exist. So there is some immorality in that kind of transaction, because no price risk is assumed in that particular transaction, that will somehow go against the law of no pain no gain, al-gharam bi-ghunni. And for that reason, debt created by tawarruk and Malafida Murabaha may resemble debt created by interest-bearing loan. Resembling, they are not equal, but when they resemble, then there is a lot for us you know, to think about why the resemblance. Resemblance would imply that the impact onto the economy will be similar, and that is a cause of concern. Okay, guys, we'll stop here, and I wish that you can appreciate my approach here to categorize Islamic debts into good debts and bad debts based on the consequences and outcome of the transaction, how it impacted the economy, how it impacted the customer. So that is the methodology I was using in order to categorize the Islamic debts into that of good debts and bad debts. Okay, guys, I see you again. Please don't forget to comment and to subscribe. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi.